Welcome back to another episode of Open Globe Talk. This is your host, Rizal Thani, and I am joined today with Dr. J Wroblewski, who is an associate professor of ophthalmology at the George Washington University and the Uniformed Services University of Health Sciences. He is also the vice chair of education and a retired colonel from the U.S. Army. Dr. Wroblewski obtained his BS in military studies from the prestigious United States Academy at West Point. He got his medical doctorate from the Pennsylvania State University College of Medicine, and from there he trained in ophthalmology at Madigan Army Medical Center. He completed fellowship trainings in ocular immunology and uveitis from the National Eye Institute, and then his Ocular Pathology Fellowship from the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology in Washington. With an incredible and storied background in military medicine, this is a first for our platform to be featuring Dr. Wroblewski, who is a very incredible figure, and we are glad to have him today. So take it away, Dr. Wroblewski.
Well, I welcome you all. I wanted to talk about a couple things today. I wanted to talk about our charity eye clinic in Washington, D.C. I was lucky to know Daniel Finkelstein, who was a professor at the Wilmer Eye Institute up in Baltimore. He was a medical retina specialist, and he passed this February. Dan started a charity eye clinic in Washington, D.C. for the poor, the guise of which was mainly to do diabetic retinopathy examinations, like we heard with Evan Waxman in the Gorilla Eye Care Service in my hometown in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And Dan did this for many years until his health prohibited from driving down from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. And this clinic is staffed solely by medical students. You see the medical students there, Jason DeSantos and Sinan, the tall gentleman there, is a Johns Hopkins graduate who just started medical school at George Washington University a week or two ago. And you see some of the patients we take care of. These two sisters are from Sierra Leone. And this is Sonia Francone on the lower left. She's an intern in ophthalmology at Georgetown University, and then Allison Hong. And we do diabetic eye exams. One of the frailties of our charity eye clinic is that we're not able to do refractions. And so we have a grant from the Aid Association to the Blind. And then the second frailty is if we find a problem, someone that has a robust cataract or someone that has a retinal detachment, most of these patients are uninsured. So as a society, we need to do a better job in finding a vehicle to get everyone glasses who's driving on our highways, as well as get them in for cataract surgery when they need it. Well, I've had a great life. After college, I spent some time in the infantry, 4 years at Fort Carson, which is in Colorado Springs. And one of the things I got to do, which I really enjoyed at Penn State, was to go to Tenwick Hospital in Bomet, Kenya. And I spent 3 months there and was able to climb Kilimanjaro and go to the Ngora crater. But these are some of the patients that I saw, the young child there with kwashiorkor. The child in the upper left had Burkitt's lymphoma, had paralysis on the left side of his body. And then this young girl in the middle with the open tibia there was one of the most stoic people I've ever seen on this earth. Every day, the team of people, myself included, would pack her wounds so that they could heal by secondary intention. The lower picture is from one of our medical missions in Mauritania. I did a uveitis and ocular pathology fellowship. Briefly, Scott Bauer, who's now the head of refractive surgery at Wilmer, said, Tom Ward's retiring, you should apply to eye pathology fellowship. And I said, well, I don't really want to do eye pathology fellowship. I'd really like to do uveitis fellowship at the NEI. So he said, well, why don't you do it? That'd be a great thing for you. So I applied and swung a deal with my mentors, you'll hear about later, to do both. And just like Narsing Rao out there at Roski Eye Institute, who has fellows that do both. I was able to do both. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I was at the AFIP, and Tuesday and Thursday at National Eye Institute. This is one of our papers. I'm very interested in infectious diseases. Ahmed Hidayat and I worked with Ron Neefy, a parasitologist looking at tuberculosis. This was presented in Goa at a meeting hosted by the Indian Uveitis Society. Narsingh Rao was very helpful. Wayne Myers was one of the preeminent leprologists in the United States of America. And one of the things I'd like to talk about is eye pathology. Where are we going with eye pathology? There's not many people who are trained in eye pathology. A lot of the people are older, that the greats in ocular pathology. And John Clarkson down at the Bascom Palmer has this piece in 2009 in the Archives of Ophthalmology that looks at where are we going to train people in eye pathology. I've had a lot of different interests, and I recently gave a talk for the Ukrainian combat talk on chemical and biological warfare. And I've had some experience with that, examining some of the mustard gas patients who had been exposed to chemical munitions while they were in Iraq. This was the talk, and that's available on YouTube. Well, as the last fellow at the AFIP, I was trained by Ahmed Hidayat over here, and then Doug Cameron, who came from the Mayo Clinic on the upper left there. And then down in the lower left, we see Lauren Zimmerman. But the real pearl in this group here is this young lady who's passed, Helen Campbell Forrester Wilder. She was a histopathologist tech who ran the ocular pathology service at the AFIP for many, many years. She has papers on toxocariasis catus. She has one of the only papers on the ocular injuries from the Hiroshima bomb blast. And she was one of the only people who is an honorary member of the American Academy of Ophthalmology without being an ophthalmologist. Well, Lawrence Zimmerman loved to teach people. He taught maybe 50 fellows, many who are still alive and running the ocular pathology departments throughout the country. And so after Ahmed Hidayat's passing and after the closure of the AFIP, Dr. Nussenblatt at the National Eye Institute talked about continuing the course in some fashion. And so these great people, Charles Eberhard at the Wilmer Eye Institute on the upper left, Sander Dabovy on the lower left at Bascom Palmer, and then the great Tatiana Millman at Wills Eye Hospital, and then Vivian Lee from Shea Eye Institute. They help support our course that we run down in DC. This course has been virtual the last 2 years. We had someone from as far as Australia come to the course, and this year it's going to be in person. Well, it's important, I think, as an ophthalmologist to honor your mentors. And we all have mentors, and sometimes we don't get to say goodbye to them. This is a talk that will be published virtually at the World Ophthalmic Congress in the middle of September for Ahmed Hidayat. That's his wife, Sana, who's still alive in Rockville. Well, Dr. Devkin gave the answers of 2 questions that he always asks future residents of his program. And I'm going to show both my questions. And these have been met with some joy, but sometimes the candidates tell me that they just make them sad. But the first was, I always ask them, what's the difference between an owl eye and a human eye? And the second question comes from this textbook, The Artist Eyes, right here. And we'll cut and paste that. And it's a picture of Monet's garden with Monet when he had cataracts. And usually a resident or a future resident can figure it out. It's interesting to see what people will say when they look at that. These are the folks that help us with the cherry blossom. And there's Dr. Nussenblatt there from the National Eye Institute. He has his book is in, I think, the 3rd or 4th edition right now. Well, of late, I've been focusing on quality assurance since I left the Walter Reed. And this is a paper that was published in April, a letter to the editor on fibers in the surgical field, trying to look at why we're getting so many fibers. Also been looking at, this is a case that happened at the scrub sink. The nurse came to me and said, "Doctor, the patient has a contact lens in his eye." I said, "Oh, is that the eye I'm operating on?" So I broke scrub, or I didn't get it in the scrub, and I went to the patient and said, "Sir," he happened to be a lawyer, "pray tell, did you wear the contact lens when we took your measurements?" "I'm not sure." I said, "Sir, I don't think it's a good that we do your cataract surgery." And this is the picture on the IOLMaster 700B showing the contact lens when the measurement. And in this, hopefully, paper will be published, shows the difference in the power. It was about 6 diopters. So I've not been very good at this, but I think as part of your training in what you do, you really have to enjoy yourself. And this was a Picasso exhibit that I took the residents to at the Phipps, or the Phillips Museum in Washington, D.C. recently. And I think you have to cultivate things. You don't want to be the geek like this gentleman in the photograph. This is this is in Nepal, just above Namche Bazaar. Dr. Tabin probably would scoff at this, but there I am reading the home study book that I carried about Nepal up to Everest Base Camp. And enjoy things, find things you enjoy. These are pictures from the Howard Astronomical League of Comet Neowise, and then our closest galaxy friend to us, M31, the Andromeda Galaxy. So this is who I am. I'm at George Washington University. You can join us down here for the cherry blossom this February, or join my friends. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Wroblewski. I do have some parting questions from you. You mentioned, you've been in the Army for so long, and now you've transitioned into George Washington. How was that experience like, going from being an Army doctor to being a civilian physician?
Well, there were a lot of changes, sort of like being a father of 5. I was the chair at Walter Reed for a good many years, almost 5 years. So coming down to be a staff ophthalmologist was the first piece of humble pie. Sort of your opinions don't really count too much. The second thing is that there's a lot of trauma here. When there were a lot of protests, we saw a lot of pellet gun injuries, a lot of eyes that were lost from that. Very similar to what we saw as the casualties came in from Afghanistan, in Iraq at the Walter Reed. Thirdly, we've gone through a big transition at our facility for RVU-based work RVUs, the relative value unit. And as people have been through that, you realize you feel like a gerbil on the wheel, that you're just running and running. And it's difficult because you're not compensated for the things that really make you happy, which is teaching, teaching at the microscope, teaching uveitis. And so that's been difficult.
As I've heard you speak, you're very concise, and you're able to deliver most of your lessons very, very well. And I wondered, if anybody who is planning to go into the military and work as an ophthalmologist, how is the teaching style there?
Well, my boss was Colonel Thomas Mader at the Madigan Army Medical Center, and he was famous for publishing a paper on refractive surgery, RK, and altitude. And that paper came to fruition with the Into Thin Air mess that happened by John Krakauer. And he was a great boss. He was actually wounded by sniper fire on his tour in Afghanistan. He's now working for NASA, looking at the optic nerve swelling, what happens with the cerebral spinal fluid with Dr. Lee, Dr. Subramanian. So I was really blessed because I was at Fitzsimmons, which is now Colorado, University of Colorado out there. I was at Madigan, and then I came to Walter Reed, where there were many, many great staff. Two to mention was Bill Wilson, who was a missionary in Sierra Leone and also in Papua New Guinea. And then a former staff who's now at KCI Institute, Dan Graydon, who had served. I didn't serve with him at the Walter Reed, but I met him when I was stationed in Heidelberg. He had been a medical ophthalmologist or a surgical ophthalmologist in Kikuyu Eye Hospital in Kenya. And those two individuals were just great people. Bill Wilson came down to Trinidad and Tobago with us. And then I visited Dan in Kenya with his wife, Sally, and children. And we went out on 2 surgical safaris. So I think I've really had, an interesting career in ophthalmology. And looking back, I wouldn't have done it any other way.
It's interesting you mentioned your medical mission trips, and technically they're Army mission trips, and mission in the sense of doing mission, not the religious type of mission, which is also interesting. I just got back from the Global Ophthalmology Summit, and I find it really interesting because there was a talk about medical mission work, that most of the medical mission work in underserved regions are very short, and they don't continue over a long period of time, whereas the current theme now is sustainability. And I just wanted to get your take on how that used to be when you were in the Army.
Well, I mean, I did 7 or 8 missions. Usually it was with Southern Command into Central America, but I did go to Trinidad and Tobago 3 times. And a couple of points I've learned is that you really have to look at what you're going to do there. And one of the places we went, we weren't very welcome. The government, our government, sent us into sort of a hostile environment. And the local ophthalmologists didn't want us there because they thought, well, we were doing surgery for free and that we are going to hurt their business. The second point is that we save all these glasses, certain organizations, the Lions and others, and you go down to a country and that you bring thousands of glasses. But really, a lot of times when we're in El Salvador twice, I realized that we are hurting the local folks because we're just flooding the market. The point you're making about sustainability at the Moran Eye Institute meeting you just went to in Park City or Utah was that I think by going to the same place every year, you're able to create, you're able to train people and likewise train you. And it's the relationships that are most important. When I was in the Army, I bought a microscope, a Zeiss microscope, a phaco machine by AMO. It was a compact sovereign. I bought a Retina Max, an autorefractor, and an A-scan from Sonomed. And those are now with John Kempen, who had been at the Wilmer Eye Institute. He's a uveitis specialist, and he's at Sight for Souls in Addis Ababa. John comes back every year and speaks to us there. But you have to be real careful with your equipment donations because you want to be able to make sure that they're going to get repaired. And also the tubing can be very, very expensive. So you just have to be very careful. I've wanted to go down to Crudum, to the Sacred Heart Hospital in North Haiti, and that's my goal. And unfortunately, there was 17 people who were kidnapped recently but just Tuesday, I met someone from our embassy in Haiti. So I'm hoping to go down to Haiti once things are a little bit stable. Our residents used to go to Ecuador every year, and they loved it. One of our plastics folks and one of our cornea and comprehensive staff would go to, and I'm hoping that we can get that off the ground, because I think that is so enriching to see how other people live, and to be able to see the type of cataracts that you're faced with. I think, as we look at, life histories, Alan Crandall was just one of the greatest people recently who passed a year ago, in the Himalayan, Dr. Ruit and others in the Himalayan Cataract Project, looking at those, and looking at the Kikuyu Eye Hospital is another option. But I think you have to really look, one of the things, not to belabor this point, I spent some time reading this book, Arthur C. Brooks. And this is really not a book. This is about people in the second half of their life. Where am I going? I have about 15 to 20 years to practice surgical ophthalmology. And Dr. Brooks, who teaches up at Harvard, talks about trying to find what's important. Is it the titles? Is it people? Is it your relationships? And he actually flew over to India and met someone who was a lot wiser than himself, and talked about the different stages. I found it to be very helpful book about the directions I'm leading. The directions I'm leading are continue the cherry blossom. Hopefully we break even this year, and hopefully get down to Haiti, and to continue to teach the residents in surgery, and hopefully to enjoy the wide variety of patients that I see in Washington, D.C.
Awesome, Dr. Wroblewski. I couldn't have asked for a better guest speaker to speak on behalf of the military and just what the experience is like as an ophthalmologist. It is truly very unique, and just the career paths you can pursue afterwards are limitless. Just by the nature of where you go and how much you've practiced. So I thank you with your time and all the knowledge you have provided to our listeners and our viewers. And hopefully we'll have you join in sometime later in the year as well.
Thank you very much. You have a good day.
All right. Thank you.